in last week's newsletter that I would do one of the edits where we had kind of really boring skies into one of our shots in Cape Cod. And this is Nauset Light, famed for being on the Cape Cod potato chip bag. And you see a couple things going on. For one, I got something here. I don't know what that is, and something here. So they need to go. So let's just get right into a quick Lightroom edit before we go into Photoshop. So I'm going to get the spot removal tool, and I got 3 spots. I don't know what this is. Might have been something on the lens. I've got a sensor spot right there, and who knows what this thing is. So let's get rid of that. It's going to mostly get replaced anyway, but just in case we don't have our new sky at full transparency when we bring it in. In fact, we got some telephone lines there. Let's get rid of that. I'll get rid of that. We might have to touch this up in Photoshop as well. And that was terrible. So we got to take that one and move it over here so that it makes sense. We got another little more schmutz over there, but that's all right. Okay. So what else? Let's take a look at the exposure. Exposure is actually pretty good, except we have this bright sky and these deep shadows. So let's go to the basic panel. We're going to bring the highlights way down. And we're going to bring the shadows way up. And there you go. That's kind of more what it looked like to my eye. We'll add some of our texture clarity. Do we want some dehaze? Let's take a look. It doesn't really add anything. It makes it darker, but rather do that later. And I think that is it. Perspective-wise, let's take a look. Let's bring up the crop tool and give us some guides here. I'm going to click on the corner to rotate this. So what I'm after, I want to make sure the bottom of the lighthouse is straight. So I'm going to get those 2 little lines to line up, and you can see it was slightly off. I want to get more of my sky back. We can always crop later, but I want to have the option later to do it. In fact, I do need to crop in from the left so I can get a little more headroom above the lighthouse. Let's hit done. And okay, that's looking pretty good. All right, so we've got our lighthouse. Now, I'd mentioned that when we were here, we've got some perspective issues also. You can see this building's leaning in. Again, that's not something we can easily fix in Lightroom without causing a lot of other trouble. So we'll do that in Photoshop. I mentioned that I tasked everybody who was on the trip because just over to this way, if you looked over further to the left, there was some interesting sky starting to form, but we just didn't have a good view of it where we were. So I drove down the road a bit, and I came across, let's see, where's the one that I liked the most? I came across this view. Now here's actually a little more underexposed. This was the skies that we had late in the day. It was really pretty. I thought about using this one with the slightly out of focus seagull, but I decided to take one just of the sky. And I wanted to darken it up a bit because this was just a little too light. So I'm going to bring the highlights down. I'm going to bring the exposure down. And I think in this case, I am going to add a little dehaze. Yeah, something like that. And other than that, that looks pretty good. Oh, I see a spot again. So let's get rid of the spots. This is something that Lightroom is probably better at when it comes to just a couple of simple spots than Photoshop is. And I don't know what that is, but it's gone. So let's hit done. All right, so as we go up to our grid, here's our 2 shots. And I'm going to highlight the lighthouse one, not that it really matters. And I'm going to go to Photo, Edit In, not Photoshop, but open as layers in Photoshop. All right, so here's our 2 files open up in Photoshop. I'm going to hide the sky for the time being. Let's take a look at this perspective, though. I'm going to bring up the rulers, which is Command R. And with my cursor, I'm going to come over to the left, and I'm going to drag a line. And that's where you can see the building is off a little bit. Let's bring one down and just make sure the lighthouse is straight. And that's a little bit off also. You can see the top. The distance between here is a little bigger than here, so we need to even those out as well. So the question is, can we do these as one big thing? Let's find out. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to duplicate the layer. so that I have a fallback to one that hasn't been touched. And I'm just going to take the lasso tool and draw around this entire thing. Command C, Command V to copy paste. Again, for you Windows people, Control. Okay, so there is our image. Let's go up to Edit, Transform, Warp and see if we can get things straightened out. So again, yeah, right here is a little low. So I'm just going to click on that and bring that up a little bit. That fixes that. And this building here, you know, I need a little twist to that. And we got a little tug of war going on here. Got to make sure the lighthouse. So each time I push something to the left, I have to push something to the right to counteract that. And just that much gets the building straight. The lighthouse, let's see if we bring this over a little bit, not that much. I think about there is looking pretty good. Make sure that the lightning rod is straight up and down, and I think that's good. So let's hit enter on that, and then we can turn this layer on and off and see how much we move things. Yeah, just a little bit. Now you see we've got some slight breaks in the foliage lines here. So let's hide everything except for our bent layer. And let's put a mask on this down here. Put a mask on there. I'm going to hit B to bring up a brush. And I'm going to work at 50%, which just means when you go to opacity, just hit the 5 key on your keyboard and you get 50%. And I'm going to paint with black on the mask just around our interface here, which will allow that to blend in together a little bit better. All right, so let's turn on our background layer again. And now as we move things, everything looks good. There's a little bit of a blur right here, so I'm going to keep hitting that. So let's zoom in. I've got a little double here, so we can get rid of that as well. I'll get a little smaller brush. And the nice thing about working at 50% is it allows you to continue to add. So on these places where I probably could have gone 100%, let's just do that. Just to make sure, any place where we're seeing them kind of blur from the before and after, if as you're moving around you can't see it, then certainly not a problem. I'm seeing it right here. And you can see just painting at 100%. I'm just painting on the mask. Painting at 100% to bring that back seems to fix it. Yeah, now you can see everything's getting nice and sharp. And apparently it was just along that 50% edge, so actually maybe 100% would have worked better. But this allows you to come in, and you can see as I turn these off, you can see the movement, but you can also see where the problems are. And I see some more problems up in here, so let's fix that. Just want to fix this interface. And there is a little fuzz here anyway because the wind was blowing, so we expect a little bit. Okay, so let's get rid of our guides. We'll clear the guides, clear the rulers, and now we turn this on and off, and yeah, that looks a lot better. Also have a little bit still of this thing here that I didn't completely get rid of. So function shift F5 to bring up content to where fill. Okay, so now this is looking pretty good. Now we need to incorporate this sky. So what we have to do, I'm done with these back layers now. I'm not going to need these. So I'm going to take these 3 visible layers and I'm going to merge them. And now I'm going to select the sky. So let's try the magic wand. Let's leave it on contiguous to start and see what happens when we click on the sky, what we get. And actually, not terrible. In fact, let's turn off contiguous and do that. Let's see how that works. And that's nice. It got in the window of the lighthouse. We got in behind the trees. It did pick up some of the white of the building. That's okay. We can get rid of that. All right. In fact, let's get rid of that. So let's get the L key for lasso. Hold down the Alt key. That turns it to a minus. And let's just drag around through this stuff that we don't want selected for our sky. Now we can clean this up a little bit too. Let's see how that looks. Pretty good job. I was a little sloppy on the sky there. We got missed part of the path here. Let's get rid of that. got a little bit of the lighthouse left. And as you zoom in 100%, you might find there was some more stuff you missed. And we'll see that when we create the mask from this. So no worries there. And that looks pretty good. In fact, it even took in fact, I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to add these power lines into the sky because we want them to go away. And then on top of that, I'm going to get my wand tool back again. And I'm going to turn on contiguous, hold down the Shift. I just want to get that one little bit of roof I missed. And there we go. And I picked up a little bit of extra again. So let's hold down the Alt key, get rid of this little bit of lighthouse that it picked up. Some highlights around these rims. And good. Okay, there's our selection of the sky. So let's save that. Select Save Selection. And call it Sky. Hit OK. All right. Well, but I say I missed a couple little pieces here. But again, we'll see this when we create the mask. All right, now let's get our sky. So I'm going to deselect this. I'll turn our sky on. I'm just going to select all. Command A or Control A and Command C or Control C, which is copy. That puts it on the clipboard. I can now turn this layer off and go get our selection. So let's load our sky that we just saved, which is under Channel, Sky. Hit OK. Now remember, our sky is sitting on the clipboard, and I can see I missed stuff down the bottom here. Doesn't matter. Go to Edit, Paste Special, and again, remember, we copied the entire sky, which means it's sitting on the clipboard, and with Paste Special, paste into, it will put the sky in where our old sky was. And actually looking pretty darn good already. So let me back off on this. I'm going to unzoom this a little bit because I can get the V key, which is the move tool, this thing right here, and we can drag this thing around. Now, resolution-wise, this sky was exactly the same resolution as the original shot, but you might want to move things. In order to do that, you're going to have to make it a little bigger. So let's hit Command T, which will just allow us to transform to make the sky a little bigger, just to give us a little bit of room as to where we want things to be. So now I can drag this thing around. Now having the highlights down that low doesn't make sense. I think having them up higher and actually going behind the lighthouse looks pretty darn good. Now, because when we shot the new sky and I was at the beach, the horizon went dark, where typically that's not going to happen. And you see it's causing an issue right through here. So we're going to fix that in just a sec. Okay, so here's our sky in the new position. If we come over to the layer, you can see the mask here. Let's hold down Alt and click on the mask, and you can see the little spots that got missed. So let's zoom in a bit. Get a brush. We're just going to paint at 100%. Let's make ourselves a little bigger brush, painting at 100%, and notice we have the mask selected. So I'm just going to paint with black over top of this. And there, notice all our spots go away. Now we're going to further do some things on the mask anyway. And we can also see some other spots that got missed. So if I make the mask a little, or make the brush a little smaller, I can see some spots like here on the roof. Let's fill those in with black. I can see another problem up on the roof here. There's a little bit right there. And what else? Everything else looks pretty good. Oh, there's a little spot here. Let's put black there. And I know this little ridge line of the top of the house is, you can see the little molding changes. We get a little tiny brush here. Hold down Shift and then click again. And there we go. Okay, so now let's click back on our sky. Now, notice I said that this was not going to blend well together, and it was never going to because the trees are blowing a little bit. There is wind going on here. But we don't want the sky that dark down the foreground anyway. So we're going to use a gradient on top of our mask, and that's the G key. So you'd simply hit G. And if you don't have the defaults up here, you can click up here and click on Basics. And the one we want is the middle one, which means foreground to transparent. That's what these mean. And we're going to come down into the image with black. I'm going to hold down the Shift key to keep it straight. I want it 100% black from here, and I want it to fade to 0 about there. And let's see how good a job that does on top of the mask as far as getting our sky to blend in. All right, so we did our gradient, and if you look at the mask now, again, if I hold Alt, you can, and click on there, you can see, and the problems are in here. So I'm going to get the brush again. I'm going to work at about 30%, and I'm just going to darken around these areas here just a little bit through these tree thingies. And let's see if that is enough to have our sky blend in cleaner. And it is. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up the entire sky just a little bit. Bring the opacity down a smidge, which will help things blend in a little bit better. And that's more believable. You're expecting kind of this softening. I'm going to get a big brush again, though. I'm going to work at about 10%. And I just want to lighten up this area here. And notice just painting 10% allows that to blend in so much better. Okay. So good, there we go. We went from there to there. Now we've got a new sky, and I'm going to create a composite of this. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, click on the menu, and choose Merge Visible. A couple of reasons. One, I got to get rid of these lines again. I've got these power lines over here that just have to go. And I'm going to use the Stamp tool at 100% and make a nice small stamp. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key up here, click the sample from that, and I'm going to click, come over to the end, and click again, and that will help to get rid of that. Let's do the same here. Could I have used the Content Aware fill here? Yes, the selection would have been a little more complicated, but yes, you could. And the nice thing about this is I can just paint this area, come over to the end, hold down the Shift key, and click, and off it goes. And as with any time you're using the Stamp tool, it's usually handy to keep moving the position, hitting click, Alt click, so that you can get rid of these things. Changing your, I got a little big there. Changing your position just allows things to blend together a little bit better. Yeah, there's some more stuff in here. I guess we can do something about that. Let's try using the Lasso tool. So where are the problems? That one, hold down the Shift key, that one. Just get rid of these little pieces that are very straight lines. Some of the ones that actually go through the tree, like in here, you wouldn't even notice. All right, so with that, let's hit Function Shift F5, Content Aware Fill. Let's see how good a job that does, and beautiful. So here we are backed off, and it looks a lot better, certainly from where we started. In fact, if I turn off the layers, you can see there's our original sky after our basic edits, but the sky still needs a little bit more. In fact, the whole image needs a little bit more pop. And I'm going to do something that's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to click on the top layer, and I'm going to send this into Nyx Silver Effects Pro. And you might be thinking, well, Joe, that's a black and white program. And yes, it is, but we're going to use it in a little bit different method. So here's Silver Effects Pro open. Let's go to full screen on this. And I had already made some adjustments. So here's the original. And here are some adjustments that I had done to the software. And you're saying, but Joe, what did you do? Okay, let's do that. Let's go back. I'm just going to reset everything. We'll just put it back to neutral. Okay, that's where we started. Now, there are these defaults over here. If you look down the left-hand side, there's a bunch of defaults. But what I'm after is I want to add more contrast and more structure to the image. So let's just cut to the chase. Let's add a whole bunch of structure and some more contrast. And I'm actually going to bring the brightness down a little bit. And what this is going to do is basically create a tone map that we're going to put over top of the original image. And you might be wondering, again, what is that? Well, you'll see. I can also apply a color filter here. Let's see what orange does. Yeah, I like that. It lightens up the foreground and does make the background still more contrasty. In fact, let's see what happens. That's too much. Let's add more contrast. So what this is going to do is any image in this black and white that's lighter than the image we're going to put it on top of once we change the blending mode is going to lighten that and then darken obviously the same thing, or just the opposite. So let's hit OK on this. I have it the way I want it. In fact, if we again look before and after, and yes, by the way, this would also make a pretty good black and white as is. Originally thought it was going to be kind of gloomy, but actually it's not bad. And to keep the sky from going too light, actually, I'm going to click a control point, put it up in this bright bit of sky, make that a little bit bigger, and I'm going to bring the brightness. That's too much. Let's make it smaller. So I'm going to make this brightness here a little bit darker. There we go. And I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag it around to some of the other spots, because if I don't do this, what's going to happen is when we bring it into Photoshop, the effect is going to make what's underneath it very bright. And I do want to have the top of the lighthouse a little bit brighter too. So I'm going to click on there and add a little bit more brightness just to that. So let's hit OK. Here's our Nyx Silver Effects image on top of, so you can see there's the before and after, and you can see the structure looks really good, but what if we do want color? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come over in the Layers panel, see where it says Normal. We're going to click on that. We're going to change it to Overlay. Now relax, it's going to be way overdone. That's okay. Then we're going to bring the opacity down, probably 30% or so. Well, maybe even more than that. Yeah, actually about right. That's more. It's more like 50%. Now I'm looking at the sky. It's making the foreground much too dark, and that's okay because we're going to fix that. All right. Now there's a couple different ways we could fix this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click back on our layer below here, and I'm going to go to Select Color Range, and I'm going to select the shadows. And there's a fuzziness thing here which will expand that. I want to have it at its minimum, and I can even cut down on the range a little bit. What I'm after is I want to stop the Silver Effects gray layer from affecting the shadows. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And that's going to select all these deep shadows that went way too dark. And now with the Silver Effects layer selected, click on a mask. Now in this case, it got me exactly the opposite of what I wanted. If I hold down the Alt or Option key and click, you can see that's what it gave me, which is rather interesting. But I want the inverse of this. So it's Command or Control I, which makes a negative of that. And now it's going to stop Silver Effects from having an effect on those dark areas. So now if we turn this on and off, you can see it adds the pop to the sky, it adds some pop to the lighthouse, but the shadows are left alone. How cool is that? And it added a little brightness down here. So just doing that, look how much more interest that adds to the whole scene. Now if there's a place it's affecting, maybe you don't like what it did to the roof of the building here, no problem. Get your brush, click on the mask, and just paint, and it will subtract that effect from those spots. There's a little bit extra here too. I didn't like exactly what it did, but everywhere else, I really kind of like what it did. And as I see this, I see I have one bit of leftover, probably from one of those power lines here. So I'm going to create another stack, hold down the Alt key, choose Merge Visible, so that we have one layer that is everything combined. And I'm going to select this and function Shift F5 for content aware fill. See if that will do it for us. And there we go, that's gone. All right. Now, is there more I could do? Yes, there's a person over here, and we'll explore getting rid of people and compositing a little bit more a little bit later. So I'm going to leave her there for the time being because this is running long as it is. But again, we started there and we ended up here. Much more interesting image, and it just shows you that when you have a cloudy day, just think about the final print. Think about what you can do to make it better, and look around. Maybe there's some clouds nearby that just aren't pointing in the right direction, and that's what we did here. Oh, and before I leave, I see a spot right there. That's got to go. Function Shift F5, hit Enter, get rid of our spot. Well, let's take a look at it at full screen and get our cursor out of the way. Yes, I like it. Even though it was a cloudy day, It's got some drama, but again, in weather like this, the greens have a tendency to pop because the lack of red in the sky, because it's gone very blue, makes the greens more intense. So enjoy. I hope you enjoyed that. That was some advanced stuff, but it can really make for much more interesting skies by taking your same image, creating a black and white, and then changing the blending mode. So play with that. I know you'll have a lot of fun with it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys online again soon. Bye-bye.